Thank you, Deborah. The general election is Tuesday, and just days before the election, we are going beyond the ballot. Joining us this morning is AG Gancarski from FloridaPolitics.com. AG, thank you so much for waking up with us. We have a lot on the ballot to talk about, and let's begin with early voting. It ends tomorrow, but in what effect do you think early voting has had on the way that many candidates have campaigned?
I think Ron DeSantis has really maximized early voting in a way that Republicans haven't previously. He stresses his rallies. He's doing a lot of rallies around the state. He's always telling people, get your vote in early if you can, because something can happen on election day. This is a deviation from the Donald Trump message of 2020 especially.
Well, and let's also talk about Ron DeSantis. The governor has a number of lawsuits against him right now for the policies that he's enacted, but it doesn't appear, at least in polling that we've seen, that that's affected his base at all.
Right, and you've got to look at what DeSantis has done in the last few years. I mean, he set himself up as sort of a counterweight to Joe Biden, which is a very good place for a Republican governor to be. So all these policy moves are reactive to Biden. And when you've got a president who's not very popular here in Florida and a lot of other places in the country, it's possible to actually, gain off these things. We've seen polling that has Hispanics back, the play in Martha's Vineyard, which is surprising to anybody who looked at it from the outside. But DeSantis has done a really good job controlling narrative. Democrats have not. And on things like Martha's Vineyard and these other issues that the governor has taken heat from the national media, it's not going to him in this election.
I want to stay with DeSantis for a little bit before we go off to any other candidates, but there is more than just a whisper that he would be a presidential candidate in 2024. Do you see any effect with the governor's race with those maybe more than rumors?
Well, I think he needs to take Duval County. I think that's going to help him in something like that. He's going to point to whatever he does on Tuesday as an example of this is how Republicanism works. People buy into it in the so-called purple state. It's no longer purple anymore. And it helps him make good play. The big 900-pound gorilla in the room is Donald Trump. Donald Trump is looking at running. And if Donald Trump gets in a race, that creates a situation where somebody like Ron DeSantis comes off as a second choice. So I think DeSantis' viability depends on Trump not being in the field, but everything we're seeing is Trump is leaning toward getting in the race next month.
Let's talk about Ron DeSantis' opponent in the governor race, Charlie Crist. The former governor has a lot of key talking points so far in this race. How do you think that's trying to sway voters to, in his view, put him back in the governor's office?
Well, he's played really heavily on the abortion issue, especially. Since the Dobbs decision, Democrats have played off that. Crist has because of the state's new abortion law that bans after 15-week of gestation. I don't know if it's really worked because when you look at the polls and you look at turnout, they're not really turning out for Crist. Crist had a lot of events here in Jacksonville, not a lot of turnout, not a lot of enthusiasm. And when you look at somebody like Ron DeSantis, he's getting this enthusiasm across the state. So the abortion issue, these other issues aren't really resonating. It may help Val Demings more in her race with Marco Rubio, but I don't think it's playing in the governor's race the way that Democrats would have hoped in August.
I'm glad you brought up the Senate race. That was my next question. What is the biggest tipping point between the Rubio-Demings race?
The biggest tipping point is, can Demings make the case that Rubio is simply not doing his job? I mean, that's their central argument. Rubio is not showing up for Floridians. Rubio's case is simple. Demings votes with Biden and Pelosi and the Democratic establishment. Which case is going to prevail? It probably plays well for Rubio, given that we're looking at things that suggest a Republican wave election this year in Florida. Demings still has a couple of days, but her message hasn't really deepened from the time she announced over a year ago. It's been the same few things. I don't know if that's going to get swing voters out to vote for her on Tuesday.
Another race that we're following very closely is sheriff in Duval County. TK Waters and Lakeisha Burton each have more than 20 years of experience in law enforcement, but how do you think their messaging, and specifically against crime, is resonating with voters?
Well, I mean, both are anti-crime, obviously.
Certainly.
But, Waters has the police union support. He has the support of sheriffs. So, if you're looking for the law and order candidate, that is Waters. Burton has talked about reform. And you've seen people like Molly Curry and Gary Charchin, Republicans cross the aisle for her in that reform message. And that may help her. Will that be enough? Waters has more money. Waters has a lot more machine-type endorsements. So we'll see how it goes. Ron DeSantis, of course, backs Waters, and I fully expect a closing robocall for Waters and Ron DeSantis's from Ron DeSantis, and I expect that if Waters wins, Ron DeSantis takes credit.
Fascinating. That it would go, Governor. I do want to talk about Georgia real quick before we jump off. Herschel Walker, famous football player, not a whole lot of experience in politics specifically, but he's making this a very tight race with Warnock in the Georgia Senate campaign.
Yeah, and if Herschel Walker wins, and that's still a big if, polling says it could go either way, you've got to give Rick Scott credit here in Florida. National Republican Senatorial Committee chair, he's leaned in for Walker, and he's confident that Walker can pull it off. He expects a Republican majority Senate. I think you got to watch how far Walker goes from Brian Kemp. Like, Brian Kemp's probably going to beat Tracy Abrams, but you're going to see a spread between them. And how much that spread is informs what Tuesday's going to look like in Georgia.
Fascinating. AG Gancarski, thank you so much for joining us this morning. And for more on his work, floridapolitics.com. I'm sure you're diving far more into all of these races and many, many others.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And we're back right after this.